When a surgeon adopts a new implant system, they need more than a tray and a rep in the room. Some of them need another surgeon to walk them through the technique. Marcus Chen. SynTera Orthopedics. Proctoring is peer-to-peer surgical education. A SynTera-trained proctor, an experienced orthopedic surgeon who has implanted the Pinnacle system in hundreds of cases, comes to the hospital and observes a new adopter's first cases. They stand in the room, not as an employee but as a clinical peer and educator. The proctor can offer technique feedback, suggest a resection angle, point out when the tibial tray is slightly externally rotated, ask questions that help the new surgeon think through their decisions. What the proctor does not do, they don't operate, they don't touch the patient. They are an observer and educator. The surgeon is the surgeon. From my perspective, I facilitate the proctoring arrangement. I coordinate logistics, scheduling, credentialing the proctor at the hospital, ensuring a complete tray. I'm present as case support. The compliance piece. Proctors are compensated by SynTera at fair market value for their time and expertise. There is a written consulting agreement. The proctor's selection is based on expertise and geography, not implant volume. SynTera tracks every proctoring arrangement and reports the compensation through open payments. A surgeon who completes a successful proctored series, typically 5 to 10 cases, is operationally independent and commercially committed. Agentforce proctor program records link proctoring cases to surgeon adoption curves, showing conversion velocity post-proctoring versus self-directed first cases. Proctoring as peer-to-peer surgical education. Surgical proctoring is the practice of having an experienced surgeon observe and provide feedback to a colleague who is adopting a new surgical technique or implant system. In orthopedics, proctoring is particularly valuable when a surgeon transitions to a new implant system with a different instrument sequence or technique philosophy than their training system. The proctoring relationship allows real-time feedback during live cases that a device rep, non-clinical, non-sterile, cannot provide. The proctor is typically a peer of similar specialty and experience, a fellowship-trained adult reconstruction surgeon proctoring another adult reconstruction surgeon, which makes the feedback credible and collegially received. The proctor does not operate on the patient. They observe, communicate, and provide educational commentary. The operating surgeon retains full clinical responsibility for the procedure and the patient. The proctor's role in conversion, from trial to independence. A surgeon who adopts a new implant system through self-directed trial cases, first case alone, then subsequent cases without peer educational support, progresses more slowly through the learning curve and has higher variability in early outcomes than a surgeon who undergoes a structured proctored series. The proctored series typically involves 5-15 cases during which the proctor observes, provides feedback on technique, identifies patterns in the adopting surgeon's approach, and communicates systematic improvements. After a successful proctored series, the surgeon has both the technical proficiency and the peer validation to proceed independently. From a commercial perspective, proctored surgeons convert faster, they reach procedural independence sooner, generate case volume earlier in the adoption cycle, and have lower early case complication rates that might otherwise trigger self-doubt and reversion to the prior system. AdvaMed compliance requirements for proctoring arrangements. Surgical proctoring arrangements involve a payment from a device manufacturer to a physician, the proctor, a transfer of value that must comply with the AdvaMed code. Compliance requirements include 1. A written consulting agreement that specifies the educational service proctoring, the expected number of cases, the time commitment, and the compensation. 2. Compensation at fair market value for the proctor's specialty and geographic market, typically $2,000, $5,000 per day of proctoring plus reasonable travel expenses, benchmarked against FMV surveys. 3. Documentation of the legitimate business purpose, the educational need for proctoring this specific surgeon on this specific system. 4. No linkage between the proctoring arrangement and the proctor's own implant volume with SynTera. The proctor is selected based on clinical expertise, geographic proximity, and scheduling availability, not their status as a high-volume SynTera user. Open payments reporting of proctoring compensation is mandatory. Surgeon credentialing requirements for proctors. Beyond AdvaMed compliance, proctors must be credentialed at the hospital where they will observe cases. Hospital credentialing for observing physicians typically requires active medical license in the state, current board certification, documentation of hospital privileges at their home institution, malpractice insurance verification, immunization and health screening records, consistent with vendor credentialing requirements, and a hospital-specific visitor or observer policy acknowledgement. Some hospitals require that the proctor apply for temporary clinical privileges, a process that can take 30–60 days, before allowing them to observe in the OR. The rep's logistical role in proctoring includes coordinating the credentialing process between the proctor, the hospital, and SynTera's medical education team, in advance of the scheduled proctoring cases. The proctor network as a commercial and educational asset. SynTera's proctor network, the roster of experienced, trained surgeons who are available to proctor new adopters, is a commercial asset that accelerates territory-wide adoption. A well-managed proctor network provides geographic coverage, proctors in proximity to new adopter hospitals, specialty depth, adult reconstruction proctors for primary joint replacement, revision experience proctors for complex cases, trauma proctors for fracture fixation, scheduling flexibility, and institutional diversity proctors from academic, community, and private practice settings. Agentforce proctor program management tracks which proctors are active in each territory, how many proctoring engagements they have completed, their scheduling availability, and their credentialing status at key accounts, enabling reps to quickly identify and deploy the right proctor for a new adopter's needs. I've been in an operating room during a total knee replacement. I've seen the moment a surgeon asks the scrub tech for the tibial resection guide, and I've known exactly which one it is before the scrub tech finds it in the tray. Chen, SynTera Orthopedics. But I'm not sterile, and knowing what I know doesn't give me the right to reach into the sterile field and hand it over myself. The sterile field is defined by the surgical drapes around the patient, the gowned and gloved surgical team, and the sterile back table. Everything within that boundary is sterile. I am not. I maintain a minimum 18-inch separation from any sterile surface. I never reach across the drapes. I never hand anything directly to the surgeon or scrub tech. I never touch the implant packaging inside the sterile field. What I can do, I can open the outer packaging of a sterile implant and present it to the scrub tech to retrieve aseptically. I peel the outer wrapper open. I extend my arms toward the sterile field without entering it, and the scrub tech takes the inner sterile package from the presenting tray without my fingers touching the sterile portion. I can direct verbally. I can confirm sizes. I can say the size 5 femoral is in the second row left side without touching anything. The OR circulating nurse or the surgeon has the authority to ask me to leave the OR. That is their authority. It is not negotiable. Patient safety is not a commercial consideration. It is not negotiable. Agent force or activity logs, case attendance, account, surgeon procedure are maintained as part of my vendor compliance record. The sterile field, definition, and inviolable boundary. The sterile field in surgery is the physical zone surrounding the patient's operative site, maintained at a level of sterility that prevents introduction of microorganisms into the wound. The sterile field encompasses the draped patient, the exposed surgical site, and the sterile drapes covering the surrounding area. The surgical team members who have scrubbed, gowned, and gloved, rendered sterile from the hands to the elbows and the front of the gown, and the sterile back table and instrument trays. Anything that contacts the sterile field must itself be sterile, or the field is considered contaminated. A contamination event, a non-sterile person or object breaking the sterile plane, requires the surgical team to re-establish sterility, which may require re-draping, regowning, and potentially returning the patient to the starting position. Contamination events are documented as surgical incidents and may contribute to surgical site infection, SSI, the most serious infectious complication of elective joint replacement. The 18-inch rule and non-sterile traffic control. The 18-inch, approximately 46 cm, separation standard between non-sterile personnel and the sterile field is a widely adopted practical guideline derived from the principle that non-sterile individuals must maintain sufficient distance to avoid inadvertent contact with sterile surfaces during movement. In the device reps as non-sterile observers maintain this separation from the back table. The surgical drapes and gowned/gloved team members. When the room is crowded, anesthesia team behind the patient, circulator moving between supply areas, multiple surgical team members, maintaining 18 inches in a small or suite requires spatial awareness and deference to team movement. A rep who crowds the back table, reaches toward a sterile surface reflexively, or fails to step back when the team repositions creates a contamination risk that the team is justified in responding to by requesting the rep's removal from the room. The aseptic transfer technique. How reps open sterile packaging. When additional sterile components implant sizes not initially on the tray, supplementary instruments, are needed intraoperatively, the device rep may be involved in opening sterile packaging to allow the scrub tech to retrieve the contents without contaminating themselves. The correct technique: peeling the outer non-sterile wrap from the corners in a smooth motion, presenting the open package toward the sterile field without allowing the outer wrapper to contact the sterile contents, extending the arms without entering the sterile zone, is a specific manual skill that reps are trained to perform. Common errors include allowing the outer wrapper to fall forward and contact the sterile inner package, touching the inner package when retrieving it from the outer wrapper, or reaching into the sterile field instead of presenting the package at the boundary. A rep who performs the aseptic transfer correctly is operationally valuable. A rep who contaminates an implant package during transfer has created a situation that requires the scrub tech to discard the item and request a replacement. The circulator's authority, who controls or access. The circulating nurse is the team member responsible for managing the environment, controlling traffic in and out of the room, managing non-sterile activities, maintaining documentation, and communicating with supply areas outside the The circulator has the institutional authority to request the removal of any non-sterile observer, including a device rep, from the operating room at any time, for any reason. A surgeon may also request that a rep leave the room. These requests are not subject to commercial negotiation or pushback. They are clinical and environmental decisions within the authority of the care team. A rep who understands this authority and who demonstrates through their behavior that they will defer immediately to the circulator's direction, builds the trust that earns them sustained or access over time. A rep who argues, delays, or fails to comply with an instruction to leave or creates a behavior record that hospital staff will share with directors and nurse managers, or access documentation and the vendor compliance record. Most hospital systems require device representatives to document each visit, account, date, time in/out, surgeon, procedure type, through their vendor credentialing platform, Simpler, or through a hospital-specific rep management system. This documentation creates a vendor compliance record that hospital administration uses to verify that rep or access is consistent with facility policy, credentialing current, authorization obtained, access limited to appropriate procedure types. Reps who fail to sign in/out, who access areas of the hospital beyond their vendor agreement scope, or who enter without verified credentialing, are subject to access suspension or termination. Agentforce or activity logs synchronize with these external documentation requirements, providing a complete longitudinal record of every visit by account and surgeon. There are conversations happening above me about the accounts below me. My job is to know what those conversations are about. Marcus Chen, SynTera Orthopedics. SynTera has a national accounts team. They manage relationships with IDN corporate supply chain, the people at Baylor Scott & White's headquarters who negotiate contracts across all 52 hospitals, not at the individual facility level. When BSW's corporate supply chain director meets with SynTera's national account director, they're talking about total system volume, tiered pricing across all BSW facilities, service terms, consignment financial exposure, and clinical protocol alignment. That conversation is not happening at the hospital level. It's happening between two corporate teams. My role in system contracting, intelligence, and execution. I'm the person who knows what's happening at the surgeon level, which surgeons are strong SynTera advocates, which accounts have high revision rates with the competitor system, which facilities are actually converting volume versus holding GPO compliance nominally. That intelligence is what my national account team needs to negotiate from a position of strength. And when a system-level contract is signed, I execute it at the account level. I transition consignment inventories to the contracted configuration. I work with surgeons through the system standardization process. I identify PPI exception candidates. I ensure that what was agreed at the corporate level actually happens in the OR. The field rep is the translation layer between system agreements and surgical reality. Agentforce account hierarchy links my individual hospital records to the BSW parent system view. So both I and the national account team are working from the same data. National account management, the corporate-to-corporate relationship. For device manufacturers whose products are subject to IDN system-level contracting decisions, a national account management (NAM) function operates parallel to the field sales organization. National account directors (NAD) or national account managers manage relationships with the corporate supply chain, group purchasing, and value analysis leadership of large IDNs, the buyers who negotiate contracts covering all member facilities simultaneously. The NAM engagement operates at a fundamentally different level from territory sales, where territory reps focus on surgeon relationships, case coverage, and hospital-level VAC approval. NAMs focus on total system volume, enterprise pricing, competitive share at the system level, contract terms and conditions, and multi-year commitments. For large IDNs, a single NAM/IDN relationship may determine device use across dozens of hospitals in a territory rep's geography. The field rep's intelligence role in national account negotiations. While territory reps do not participate directly in IDN corporate negotiations, they are the primary source of field intelligence that shapes the NAM's negotiating position. A NAM preparing to negotiate a system-level orthopedic contract with a major IDN needs to know which facilities within the system are currently using SynTera products and at what volume, which surgeon relationships are strong enough to sustain use even if a competing system is contracted, which facilities have documented clinical issues with the competitor system that support the clinical case for SynTera, and what the actual consignment financial exposure is across the system. Territory reps who systematically update agentforce with accurate, current account data, surgeon-level case mix, consignment inventory status, VAC approval status, competitor activity, provide the NAM with the intelligence needed to negotiate from an informed position rather than an estimated one. Contract execution at the hospital level, the rep's implementation role. When a system-level contract is signed between SynTera and an IDN, the territory rep's role shifts from negotiation intelligence to contract execution. Implementation activities include communicating the contract terms to individual hospital supply chain contacts, transitioning consignment inventories to the contracted product configuration, including returning non-contracted sizes and adding newly contracted items, supporting surgeon conversations about the system's implications for their practice, which products are covered at contract pricing, which require PPI exception requests, coordinating VAC notification, that the IDN contract supersedes the local approval process, and ensuring that purchasing orders at each facility correctly reference the system contract for appropriate pricing. The gap between a signed system contract and effective commercial execution at the hospital level is often 60–90 days, a period of implementation complexity that requires active rep coordination to accelerate. The dual-tier commercial organization, territory and national account coordination. The interaction between territory reps and national account managers is a structural feature of device company commercial organizations that creates both opportunities and tensions. Tensions arise when territory-level surgeon relationships conflict with system-level standardization decisions. A rep's strongest surgeon advocate uses a product not in the IDN contract. When national account terms create pricing that affects territory-level commissions, or when a NAM engagement with an IDN restricts which products the territory rep can promote at specific facilities. Opportunities exist when strong territory-level surgeon relationships provide the clinical evidence that strengthens a NAM's negotiating position, when territory-level case volume data confirms system-level commitments, or when a territory rep's account-specific relationships with or directors and hospital supply chain facilitate faster contract implementation than the NAM could achieve remotely. Agentforce account hierarchy views that are accessible to both territory reps and national account teams enable this coordination without requiring constant verbal communication. PPI exception management during system standardization. When an IDN standardizes on a competing system, surgeons who have strong clinical preferences for SynTera may request PPI exceptions, institutional permissions to use non-standardized products for specific procedures or patient populations. Managing PPI exceptions during a system standardization period requires the territory rep to identify which surgeons have the volume, relationships, and clinical rationale to successfully pursue an exception, provide those surgeons with the clinical and economic evidence to support their exception request, coordinate the exception application with the hospital VAC or supply chain, and document the exception formally so that non-contracted purchases are administratively approved rather than generating procurement compliance alerts. PPI exceptions are a commercially valuable but administratively demanding mechanism for sustaining device use through contract transitions.